Hat Days by Griffin Rose on AO3. Episode 30, Chapter 5. Tests aren't just grades. It was a rough 2 weeks before the final exams. Izuku was getting used to sharing his room for the first time, and even though both he and Hitoshi were being as nice as they could to each other, small things were quickly starting to annoy both of them. They still only had one desk, so they took turns doing their homework, there or at the kitchen table or on the floor. It wasn't a big deal, especially since Izuku tended to sprawl over the floor almost most of the time, but it seemed like every time he went to his desk, Hitoshi had moved something out of place. He silently kept moving things back, and it probably only bothered him because of the stress of the finals, but it was starting to wear on him. Izuku tended to be a restless sleeper, and he knocked stuffed animals and pillows off his bed all night. Hitoshi always scowled as he tossed them back to Izuku's bunk in the morning, and he snapped more than once that it was ridiculous someone their age still had so many in the first place. Their worst disagreement always came at bedtime, mainly the fact that Izuku actually had one and stuck to it. He turned the lights off at 9:30 most nights, and he tried to compromise and pushed it to 10 once Hitoshi moved in. He knew his new brother had insomnia, and physically couldn't fall asleep as early as Izuku, but Izuku didn't sleep as well with the lights on half the night. It only took falling asleep in class once for him to demand the lights off, which Hitoshi agreed to. With the blue lights from his laptop or phone, wasn't much better. They were still trying to work on compromising for that. Both of them were more stressed about their exams anyways. Hitoshi was aiming for perfect or near perfect scores in his, so they couldn't be used against his transfer case. Izuku faced the unforgiving hero exams. He needed Shouta for info about the practical exam, but his father was tight-lipped, and quickly grew annoyed with Izuku's pestering and made him back off. He'll find out on the day of, just like everyone else. By the time that day came, Izuku was happy just to have survived that long. The written exams were brutal, but he thought he'd done okay. The night before had also been the first time Hitoshi had willingly agreed to early lights out, just as a wrapped from his own exams. Izuku had no idea if his brother had actually slept or just laid in bed doing nothing half the night, but he had been completely unconscious and didn't care. Now, standing in front of the building with the rest of his class, all dressed in their hero costumes, Izuku bounced with nervous energy. All of their teachers stood on the steps in front of them while Shouta explained their practical exam, and Nezu squirmed out of his scarf. Izuku was sorry for Kaminari and Ashido. He wouldn't want to face their principal. He played chess against them and before and lost in 3 moves. When Nezu was in a particularly sadistic mood, he'd let the game go on longer and toy with Izuku. He didn't play chess with him very often. All of his extra sympathy flew out the window when he heard his own exam called. He was paired with Bakugo, and they'll be facing All Might. He gave his father an utterly betrayed look. It was one thing to face off against the number 1 hero. Izuku had studied All Might most of his life, and knew the man's strategies inside and out. With the option of escape, he was fairly certain he could pass this exam. But paired with Bakugo? The two of them couldn't hold a proper conversation on a good day, let alone work with each other. That was the point, of course. Obviously, they needed to use teamwork to win this, but Izuku didn't see how this could possibly end well. Typically, they avoided each other in class, and only interacted when they had to. Neither one seemed to know how to act around the other, so it was easier not to. And with how loud and violent Bakugo tended to be, Izuku had no desire to change that. Their habits had clearly been noticed by their teachers. They would be the last team to go, which gave them time to form a plan. Izuku caught Bakugo's arm as the first team went off to their exam. "We need to strategize," Izuku said. Bakugo ripped his arm free. "I'm gonna crush All Might. That's our strategy." He stomped off. "No, that's not Bakugo!" Bakugo did not stop walking off to wherever he was going. Their teamwork was off to a stellar start. He went to the viewing point to watch everyone else's matches. Maybe it would help him come up with some ideas. Kaminari and Sato's match did not inspire confidence. Their teachers' handicaps, but they were still going all out on them. Considering what they were training for, he supposed they had to. 3 years wasn't a lot of time when they'd have people's life in their hands. It was better than that. Most of his classmates found ways to pass, working together most often than not and combining their skills for a unique strategy. Watching only made him bitter towards Bakugo. His old playmate had so much potential, and together they could be incredible. But Bakugo clearly had no interest in playing nice. It was like he hadn't grown up at all from the days he'd pushed Izuku around on the playground. He still thought he was king of the jungle gym. Walking to the fake city his exam would be in, Izuku scowled at Bakugo's back. He was glad he'd gone through grade school without Bakugo. It would have been miserable to grow up next to him. Still, this was his partner for the exam. He'd have to put his personal feelings aside if he wanted to pass. "Hey, Bakugo," Izuku called, jogging the last few steps. "I was thinking." "Shut up," Bakugo snapped. "I already told you. I'm gonna crush All Might. Just stay out of my way." "You're kidding, right? You can't beat All Might. Even with those extra weights on, he's the #1 hero." Bakugo snarled at the gates. "Yeah, that's why I need to beat him. So just turn into a rat or something and don't bother me." A robotic voice announced the start of their exam, and the gates opened. Bakugo strode forward immediately, hands fleeting. Izuku struggled to keep up. "Bakugo, you'll never win in a fight against..." He was cut off when Bakugo rounded on him, slamming his gauntlet against Izuku's face. "Don't tell me what I can or can't do." Izuku crumbled to the ground, face stinging in pain. "We're supposed to be working together," he said quietly. "I don't need your help," Bakugo growled, before stomping down the streets again. What was he supposed to do now? How was he supposed to work with someone so vehemently opposite of this idea? Was there anything he could do? He climbed back to his feet, rubbing his cheek. As soon as he did, he heard All Might yell, then a powerful blast of wind knocked both of them back. Great. 30 seconds into the exam, and he'd already been knocked over twice. This was a fantastic start. Bakugo screamed and shot to his feet, propelling himself headfirst down the street to challenge All Might head-on. "Idiot," Izuku murmured. All Might was half a mile away, and he'd torn up the street and buildings on either side of the road with just a punch. This was his power level when he was holding back. And Bakugo thought he actually stood a chance? They'd never be able to beat All Might in combat. He was too strong for either of them. Their best bet was to escape through the other gate. Since Bakugo wasn't in the mood to talk, Izuku would use his bullhead actions as a distraction to sneak past All Might himself. He morphed into a crow to fly above their flight. Like he thought, it was not going well for Bakugo. His partner was already on the ground. All Might looked up, and the next thing Izuku knew, a big fist closed around him, crushing his wings to the side. He screeched. His limbs were a lot more fragile as a bird, and they'd be broken in any form if All Might wasn't careful. Thankfully, All Might realized that and loosened his grip as he landed again. "A distraction was a nice try," All Might said, "but there's no wildlife in this city. You were entirely too obvious." Bakugo groaned from the ground. "Bastard!" He was trying to make sure both of them passed. But he was the bad guy in all of this? Okay. "Do you two yield?" All Might asked. Bakugo growled out some retort while Izuku shifted into a rhino. All Might was forced to let him go, and Izuku twisted around to spear his Thor into All Might's stomach. All Might, of course, grabbed him again and chucked Izuku down the street towards Bakugo. Izuku barely managed to lift back into a human in time to avoid crushing his partner. He collided and tumbled over the asphalt again. "Stupid Deku!" Bakugo spat, pushing Izuku off. He tried to charge forward again, and All Might braced himself to receive the attack. Izuku morphed into a gorilla and grabbed Bakugo before darting off the alley. "Hey, let go!" Bakugo said. All Might gave chase, and Bakugo set off some explosions to slow him down, aiming to the ground to create smoke to cover their tracks, swearing at Izuku the whole time. Izuku didn't set Bakugo down until he'd wound his way a few more streets and could no longer heal All Might. Then, he settled Bakugo down and slammed his back against the wall, pressing his forearm against Bakugo's throat. "You're gonna listen to me, got it?" Izuku said. "You can't beat All Might head on, no matter how arrogant you are. And if we want to pass, we have to work together. That's the whole purpose of this. You better back off before I explode your face." "Would you just consider working together?" Izuku demanded. "Just for 10 minutes. He didn't think he was being unreasonable. Or would you rather All Might sucker punch you again? He pressed his own fist into Bakugo's stomach, earning a grunt of pain from him. "Fine." Bakugo growled it out. It sounded like it physically pained him. "What's your plan?" Izuku tentatively let him go, half expecting Bakugo to attack him again. "First, I'm gonna need one of your gauntlets." "Like hell." Izuku glared at him. "We can surround All Might and hit him at once. A blast that big should give us enough time to make a break for the gate." "I'm not running," Bakugo stated. Izuku was going to scream. "Fine! Then you keep All Might busy and I'll get through the gate." The words were like ash in his mouth. He hated the idea of leaving his partner behind to fight while he ran away. And the only reason he considered it, accepting it, was now because this was only an exam. If they were in the real life or death situation against the villain, he wasn't sure he'd be able to leave Bakugo behind in a fight he knew he couldn't win. Bakugo grabbed a fistful of Izuku's collar and snarled in his face. "You run through that gate before I tell you to, and I'll kill you. We are winning this fight." "What is wrong with you?" Izuku demanded, prying Bakugo's fingers off. "Getting through the gate still counts as winning." "I'm not a coward." "I never said you were. Sometimes it's smarter to run. That's literally the point of the escape gates." Bakugo shoved him and stormed down the road. "Just stay out of my way. And if we don't beat All Might, then this exam doesn't count." Izuku threw his hands up and mentally screamed. He'd known it would be hard to work with Bakugo, but he hadn't expected it to be this difficult. Why couldn't the exam had been sparring each other? They could be getting top marks if the goal was to knock the other out. "How are you smart and so dumb at the same time?" Izuku hissed, reluctantly following him. He kept his distance this time, though. He wasn't giving Bakugo a chance to hit him again. They didn't make it to the end of the street before All Might attacked again. Bakugo faced him head-on, peppering explosions all over while Izuku morphed into a rat and slipped into the shadows. And then, he hesitated. He could use this chance to slip away and make for the gate. He doubted Bakugo could keep All Might distracted for long. But he might have enough of a head start he could run through before All Might caught up to him. They'd passed the exam. But they wouldn't have showed any teamwork. One of the main skills they were being tested on, they could still fail, even if they completed the assignment. He'd have to think about it long before deciding that, yes, his father would absolutely fail them if they missed the point of the exam. If Bakugo threw a tantrum when Izuku helped him, that was Bakugo's problem, not his. He turned back. All Might was faster and stronger than him, and Izuku definitely had the advantage in agility. If he could get in close and keep himself out of All Might's grip, he might stand a chance. He didn't have to beat him, just hold him off long enough for Bakugo to get the cuffs on him. Still, a rat, he was out of their line of sight as he approached. Bakugo took a soccer punch and threw up, nearly collapsing in his own vomit afterwards. "You shouldn't have split up from your partner," All Might said. "Against a strong opponent, you were better off together." "Shut up," Bakugo rasped. "I'd rather lose than accept his help." Izuku had second thoughts about helping him. Bakugo deserved every ounce of pain All Might beat into him. If his own grade didn't rely on this, he might have walked away. Instead, he stampered down his doubts, ignored Bakugo, and flung himself at All Might as a small chimp. What the? There you are, young Midoriya. All Might reached back for him. Izuku scampered around, pulling at the hair and making him cry out. He nibbled and bit where he could, but he didn't really have long enough before he needed to dodge All Might's hands. Back off, Deku! Bakugo rasped, struggling to his feet. Izuku screeched at him. He was not going to deal with that nickname again, and Bakugo was the useless one in this exam. If he had worked with Izuku, they could have figured out a way to win. Instead, it felt more like Izuku was trying to fight both of them. How had it even got this bad between them? Sure, they weren't the closest friends. They preferred having nothing to do with each other, even after Izuku had dinner with him and his parents. Where was all this hatred and anger coming from? Was it just stress from the exam? Or was Bakugo more upset about their childhood than he let on? All Might managed to grab his tail and ripped him off his back. Okay, maybe not the best time to try and figure out Bakugo. Izuku morphed into a snake and coiled himself around All Might's arm, spreading his mouth wide. He freaked All Might out with his large fangs. All Might threw his arm out and stepped back, off balance. Bakugo took the opening. Deku, move! Izuku took flight as a swallow, and Bakugo pulled the pin of his first grenade. The blast sent Izuku hurling towards the air, and he had to morph into a turtle before he crashed into the side of the building. He fell to the ground and morphed back, dazed and arching in so many places. All Might only stumbled a few steps before regaining his balance and grabbing Bakugo. Even in All Might's grip, Bakugo let loose smaller explosions, blasting All Might in the face and temporarily blinding him. Izuku pushed himself to his feet. He lowered his back where his tailbone started. Being yanked around by his tail wasn't exactly fun, and the pain was compounded from morphing back. Not to mention, getting thrown against the building wasn't his idea of a good time either. Still, he didn't have time to properly assess himself. All Might would knock Bakugo out in a few seconds, and Izuku needed to do something. He didn't have time to make a break for the gate. All Might's superior speed would catch up to him before he even reached the end of the street. If he couldn't run, then he'll have to cuff All Might. Bakugo had the cuffs in one of his pockets, which he could be using right now since All Might's wrist was right there holding him up. But no, that wouldn't be a real victory for Bakugo. It was a good thing this exam was pass/fail only. If they were being graded on their actual performance, there's no way they'd pass. Bakugo, cuffs! Izuku shouted before he morphed into a saber-toothed tiger. Hopefully that would be enough to commute his vantage point. Hopefully Bakugo would work with him. They didn't have forever to figure this out, and he wasn't going to fail this exam just because his partner was a stubborn idiot. He pounced on All Might, who released Bakugo to catch both of Izuku's front paws before they could scratch him. Izuku lunged with his teeth and thrashed in All Might's hold, only managing to lightly scratch All Might's arm. Bakugo leaned forward with the cuffs in hand. All Might swung out of the way, and then he used that swing to hurl Izuku straight up into the sky. Izuku didn't see him punch Bakugo, but he heard the smash and spotted Bakugo face lying down 50 yards away. That was all the time he had to spot before All Might was in the air with him, fist pulled back. Izuku morphed into a hawk and dived out of range, swooping low over the streets and picking up the cuffs with his talons. With another quick morph to a grizzly bear, he halted Bakugo over his shoulder, moved the cuffs to his mouth, and headed for the gates. Damn Deku! Bakugo murmured, on the verge of some kind of consciousness. Izuku had some choice words for him when this was over. All Might cut off their escape, and Izuku turned sharply down a side road. Too sharply. Bakugo flew out and refused to let Izuku pick him up again. Izuku morphed to a human and grabbed Bakugo's shoulders. Stop fighting me, Izuku hissed. We're on the same side here. I'm not running away, Bakugo panted. He could barely keep his eyes open, and without the wall supporting him behind Izuku, honestly, he wasn't sure he could stand. No time to reach the gate. He's too fast. Frowning, Izuku had to admit, Bakugo had a point. All right, you still have a gauntlet left. I'm gonna head up with the cuffs. He pointed to the sky. And blind him with it. Then I'll cuff him while he's still off-blanded. Make as much noise as you can to keep him distracted. Finally, Bakugo nodded in agreement. Don't screw this up. Izuku rolled his eyes and morphed into a hawk again, before he said something he'd regret. With quick flaps, he took off, cuffs in his talons once more. Not a moment later, All Might rounded the corner. Bakugo had to dive to the ground to avoid being blown away. He stayed down long enough for All Might to casually step forward, but Izuku couldn't have said it was for his plan, and if he was more injured, then he let on. Either way, All Might was steps away when Bakugo rolled over and launched himself up, yanking the pin of his second grenade in the same movement. Caught completely off guard, All Might didn't even have time to shield his face before he was knocked off his back. Izuku swooped down before the smoke cleared. He had to morph back to a human for the decoratia that he needed to secure the cuffs around All Might's wrists, and the moment the trajectory meant he rolled over the asphalt a good 15 feet before he finally came to a stop. A bell dinged in the distance, and Nezu's voice announced they passed. All Might held out a hand to help Izuku up. Well done, you two. I was worried you wouldn't be able to pull off any teamwork for a while there, but it looked like you finally managed. That was an excellent plan, if a little basic. Izuku took the hand and tried not to cringe as he finally had the chance to process all of his aches and pains. There were quite a few. All Might held out a hand to help Bakugo up too, but predictably, Bakugo ignored it. He sulked the whole way out of the arena and to Recovery Girl and refused to look at Izuku the entire time. What right did he have to be mad? He was the one making things difficult. Izuku's cheeks still hurt from when he backhanded him. Yeah, wow, that was messy. I didn't even think about that. That was messy. Okay, that was actually fucking messy as fuck. Like, more messy than messy. Also, I think I'm gonna be able to get through this chapter in 2 episodes. I thought this chapter was longer. I could have sworn this chapter was longer, but oh well. But wow. Bakugo, what the fuck? That's all I have to say. All I have to say on the matter. Anyways, I don't have much else to say other than the fact that I thought that was a really interesting fight. I always like seeing the different fight scenes and stuff like that. Sometimes they get a little repetitive and boring, because like it's literally the same exact shit over and over and over and over and over. It's why for Fluffy Mine, I plan on probably skipping most of that stuff. Like the Force Festival, I think I pretty much relatively skipped through it. Same with the entrance exams. I think the only times that I'm not skipping through are like the villain fights, and even then I'm kind of slipping through, because I don't know. It's just like after reading so much of it, reading so much, you know, over and over and over, I don't remember how the main anime goes, if I'm being honest. I'm pretty sure the events that I remember is like a weird mismatch of all the different what's it called? The different words are not wording right now for me, but the different ways that give me a second, I can't. Different fanfiction smashed together. There you go. Anyways, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.